ultimately, and sadly, the gents that I work with, like, they've kind of got it all on paper, and if you were to check them out on social media or their friends would see them think, oh yeah, they've got it all switched on. But actually where they're at with the presence with the family, with how they're showing up actually at work, they're probably more stressed and snappy than they want to be. I'm not depressed, but if that's your barometer for happiness, success, something is seriously out of whack. In the moment, acutely, we have these stories where we blame ourselves or blame others. But actually, if we take a few steps back and look at the bigger picture, we realise there's so much more going on. Part of the transformation journey is, yes, there's fundamental habits, behaviours around mindset, structure, routine, physical activity, what you put in your mouth. They're really, really important. But we also need to unlock and unpick those habits and behaviours that are keeping you stuck. There is more time than you think. If we look at that person who's stressed, overwhelmed, got loads going on, says they haven't got time, maybe we'll check their screen time out. When we check their screen time, maybe that's at 6 or 7 hours a day.
Today, I'm super excited to have Luke join us in the studio. Luke is the founder and head coach at the 1%, which is a business dedicated to working with some of the UK's most successful business owners and entrepreneurs, working with them to create more balance within their life, to fix some of the challenges most modern men struggle with, which is finding time for themselves, whether that be their health, their own performance, the time with family, and juggling that with a very demanding work schedule. So Luke, from your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges professional men struggle with today?
For me, I think the big thing is this kind of inherent dichotomy. So they are materially really successful in the careers, they're really successful, so got a great job or running a really successful business, decent chunk of change in the bank, nice house, family, kids, wife, and that's all fantastic, you know, cars on the drive, but that's come at a cost. And that cost is their own mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And ultimately, and sadly, the gents that I work with, like, they've kind of got it all on paper. And if you were to check them out on social media or their friends would see them think, oh yeah, they've got it all switched on. But actually, where they're at with the presence with the family, with how they're showing up actually at work, they're probably more stressed and snappy than they want to be. They're not as present and as available for the partner. And so, yeah, it's all great on paper, but actually where they're at really as a man and how they're showing up isn't in line with where they want to be. And there's this kind of background feeling of overwhelm, maybe version on burnout. And not only that, some guys, that might sound a bit extreme, but there's this little scratch at the back of their head, this itch they can't scratch, this, it's all great on paper, but I'm okay, but, and there's always this big but. And the but usually is they're compromising their own well-being at the cost for these material successes. And you know, it's a sad situation because there's so many guys out there, in my experience, in this trap. And it's like doing everything at all costs to achieve this success, but compromising how they are and how they show up, and ultimately impacting their happiness. And long term, for a lot of the guys I work with as well, their own physical health being out of whack with where it needs to be.
What exactly seems to be the problem for these men?
So I would say one of the big things, you could call it, is making excuses, right? So the huge one people say is I ain't got enough time. And on paper, that's true, right? You're either running a really successful business with a large team, maybe you're a partner at a large professional services firm, and you've got to manage all of that, plus you've got 2 kids, plus you've got a wife, and the amount of time that you have seems super condensed. So how then, you know, and it's a fair question, are you going to take ownership of yourself, look after yourself physically, mentally, be present for your kids and family and do what you need to do? And so it seems like, given everything you've got going on, how can you possibly make time? And I'd say that's a valid excuse, it's true. But if we peel back the onion a little bit and look a bit closer, often that narrative doesn't hold up because there is more time than you think. And it's not the cliche, no, everyone's got 24 hours in a day, because that's bullshit. But if we look at that person who's stressed, overwhelmed, got loads going on, says they haven't got time, maybe we'll check their screen time out. When we check their screen time, maybe that's at 6 or 7 hours a day. Well, how about we get that to 3 hours a day? What have we done there? And so all of a sudden, some of these narratives that we tell ourselves, or my clients tell themselves, that I haven't got time, you know, aren't true and don't hold up. One of the other ones is that they're too old or too unfit. So let's say we're talking about physical stuff. It's like, oh, I'm over 40 now, I'm pushing 50 now. That means I can't take ownership of my own physical health. Or I don't have time to go and spend 2 hours a day in the gym. Well, again, that's bullshit. Who says you have to spend 2 hours a day in the gym? I was about taking 5 minutes when you wake up in the morning to do a couple of push-ups. I can't do push-ups. Well, what else can you do? And so I think there's a big narrative around time, and also sometimes where they're at physically can impact their ability or how they view what they're able to be capable of. And actually, the truth is there is always more time than they think. And for me and how we work, it's about helping give them the tools to see that and putting those steps in place.
So what would you say the journey looks like from burnout to balance? Can you describe the transformation process?
Firstly, and most importantly, the way that we work, it's not about car crashing your life, one's life, with a load of stuff. Because given what we've already said about being time poor, loads on, feeling overwhelmed, well, if we just try and ram more things into that, that's going to feel overwhelming and it'll fall over. For me, it's about making small, tiny, incremental steps and giving someone the self-ownership to be able to take responsibility for their situation and then put the requisite steps in place to address that. Now, the way that we do that is looking at the whole piece holistically. It isn't just about doing a couple of burpees or stopping putting donuts in your mouth. What we need to do is have a look at the bigger picture, everything that they've got going on, and then put the relevant steps in place to be able to address that. And part of that, is looking at what you put in your mouth, and part of that's about moving your body. But they're just two pieces of a bigger picture and puzzle called life, work, stress, family, the whole lot. And we need to make sure that whole lot works in harmony. And what we need to do is start addressing that with fundamental, practical, habitual and behavioural steps. But also what's really important is looking at those fundamental blockers that are keeping people stuck. So often the guys that I work with, we talk about it. And if I play out an example here. So let's say I decide to work with someone. What's going to increase their motivation to do anything that we ask of them? And I'm going to use exercise as an example here. There's more going on than that, but I'll use that to play it out. So we decide we're going to work together. What's going to increase their motivation to do anything that we ask of them? Well, they've got a coach, right? External accountability. That's going to increase their motivation to do anything we ask of them. Spend some money. That always helps light a fire under your arse. That definitely helps you become more accountable. It's a fact. And let's say there's a group there, maybe there's others there. So there's all these external layers of accountability to increase your motivation to do anything that we ask of them. So I say, right, let's do a little 5-minute workout as soon as you get out of bed. Can you commit to doing that? I want to start building out an effective morning routine. Can you do that? They're like, yeah, of course. So the motivation's high because they've got a coach, they spent some money, they're in a program. Great. Off the trot. Come back. Did you do the workout? No. So level 1, PT accountability. You lazy fucking prick, do it next time. And they go, oh shit, probably go off and do it. What have we learned in that interaction? Absolutely nothing. We brute forced them doing something we collectively agree that they need to do. How's that going to be sustainable long term? Probably not very. Maybe create a bit of a negative internal dialogue where they shout at themselves. Arguably not the most pragmatic response. So I could have said, why? And then they go, oh, I was knackered. Call them a prick again. I'll say, why are you tired? I was up until midnight. We're getting somewhere. Why were you up until midnight? Well, when I got in from work, I saw this report from a client, checked my phone, was really stressed. Then because I was stressed, I sort of ignored the kids, so my wife shouted at me. Then I tried to read a bedtime story, but I was checking my phone whilst I was doing it. Then because I felt bad about that, I had half a bottle of wine to unwind. Then I saw this other report just before bed, checked it, slept like shit. Okay. So are you a lazy prick, or is your evening routine out of whack? Your work-life boundaries, stress management, sleep hygiene, relationship with alcohol, relationship with your partner, technology use. So you see there, one little thing like a 5-minute workout in the morning, and actually there's a whole hornet's nest of activity underneath it that isn't serving you to get up and do that thing. And that's a real prime example of like, yes, we need to empower you and give you things you need to do, like a simple, effective morning routine with a bit of exercise. But when that doesn't happen, it's not just about beating with a stick and calling you a prick. It's about peeling back the onion to understand why. And in my experience with all the guys that I work with, there'll be countless examples, like I've just outlined there, scattered throughout their day where they want to be more present, not procrastinate, be more focused at work, make mindful choices, look in the mirror and be proud. And in the moment, acutely, we have these stories where we blame ourselves or blame others. But actually, if we take a few steps back and look at the bigger picture, we realise there's so much more going on. And for me, part of the transformation journey is, yes, there's fundamental habits, behaviours around mindset, structure, routine, physical activity, what you put in your mouth. They're really, really important. But we also need to unlock and unpick those habits and behaviours that are keeping you stuck. And if we don't do both, that's where you might join the program and in a few weeks down the line, it all goes pear-shaped again. We don't do that. When we have these problems, we run headfirst into them and address them. And for me, that's an absolutely integral part of any transformation journey, because it's not just about doing stuff. It's about empowering someone to work through the barriers and blockers that are keeping them stuck. And they're always going to happen, no matter working with me in a program or whatever else. And until you start to address those, you stay stuck. So for me, that's a very important part of the process and how you address where someone is at.
How does one recognize the need for change?
If you've got that feeling where you might say something like, I'm not depressed, but if that's your barometer for happiness, success, something is seriously out of whack. because not depressed, but like we talk about first world problems. If you've got the means and wherewithal to address your situation and you're not, and you're making statements like, I'm not depressed, but it's all right, that for me is a big red flag. Now that's like the soft end of it. If you're overweight, overwhelmed, around with your missus, feel like the balance is out of whack, not taking care of yourself, not making commitments or owning commitments to yourself and to others, be that around how you take care of yourself, be that around procrastinating at work, be that around how you treat your kids, well, that's another big fucking red flag that you need to do something about it. And there's no judgment here, I'm just being objective. And so for me, it's those two pieces. I think ultimately, you know that something's not quite right and you know you need to address it. The way I would look at this is there's always a spectrum. Do you need to wait to have an heart attack, a divorce, or things to fall apart to take ownership? No, you don't. Now, some of you might be at that point, but others might be at a point where it's like, well, it's all right, but do I really need to do anything? Well, I think bumbling through and saying it's just okay, for me, isn't good enough. And I think inherently the guys I work with know that as well. So it's like, the way I think about it is, I've used this phrase earlier, this is the like, it feels like there's an itch that you can't quite scratch. It's not quite right. It's like, I should be happy, but like, I've got it all on paper, but if that's the narrative you're sowing, for me, that's a big indication that something needs to change. And the way that we change it is by taking ownership and looking at yourself and being honest with yourself and taking an honest look and taking steps to move forward. And I think ultimately that's it. I think if you're really honest with yourself, you know if you're happy or you're not. You know if you're doing the right things you want to be doing or not. And if you can answer that honestly and the answer is I'm not, well, that's cool. That's the first step. And then you make some changes to address that.
Can you explain a little bit more about the philosophy behind the 1% and I guess how that's been developed with overwhelmed, busy men in mind?
I believe there's things that we all need in our lives, me, you, as men and women, but like specifically as men, like what I would call non-negotiables, fundamental principles that you need to have in your life around exercise, how you take care of your brain, how you show up, how you look, feel and operate within the world. And there are definitely habits, behaviours and tools and structures and things we can put in place, right? And they're fundamental and foundational, and we all need those. And that's part of what the programme is. The key differential and the most important part for me is that isn't a one-size-fits-all process. Life isn't all unicorns and rainbows. You're always going to be thrown curveballs. Work's going to go ballistic. God forbid your kids might get sick. And to think any of that isn't going to happen is remiss and foolish. It always will. And so the key difference, I believe, with me, how we work, how we operate within the 1% and how we work with our clients is that when these curveballs come at us, it's not naughty, you're not doing our program correctly. It's great. I say great because it's a learning, right? It's like, good, something shit's happened. What are we going to do about it? How can we learn? How can we build resilience? What will we do differently next time? And for me, that's really, really important because that's the crux of what really leverages where you are. So we don't run away from the busyness, the overwhelm, the stress. It's like we run headfirst into it and help our clients carve a path within that. And I think a key thing to remember there as well is it's easy for me to sit here in the cold light of day in a nice podcast studio talking about the obstacle is the way, through challenge and adversity comes success. That's right. When you're in it, it's fucking shit. Like when you're in a program and a process and it's all gone wrong and your work's gone ballistic and you feel like you've quote unquote fucked up, that doesn't feel good. And actually it's really hard and challenging. But ultimately, that's the fire in the fulcrum from which you actually get better and feel better and move forward. And so for me in our process, it's about when that happens, showing guys actually it is okay, we can keep moving forward. You can learn from this, adapt and grow, and that can build a level of resilience which ultimately makes you bulletproof. But that's really powerful. But it's also acknowledging that when it's shit, it's shit. But the truth is when it's shit, you can learn. And where most of the guys I've worked with have gone through some kind of self-development, they've tried to get fitter or stronger, maybe they've done a bit of work on themselves, maybe they've tried a couple of the quote-unquote mindset techniques to get themselves better. When work, life, whatever happens, it all falls over. The key thing for us and how I work is when it all falls over, good, what do we learn? What are we going to do differently next time? And how do we move forward? And that's the bit that allows any of this stuff to stick. It's not about having one perfect routine, because having one perfect framework without a work, that's as fragile as having fuck all. What we want is a way to be able to live and operate that's flexible and ebbs and flows and is stress tested with the demands of life. And that's what we do when things happen and they're hard and challenging. Good. What do we learn? And for me, that's the key part, I would believe, of my program in the process.
Another question I've got, and maybe we've covered this slightly so far, but I'm really curious to know what else makes this unique and what else is different about what you do in comparison to maybe some more conventional self-help or coaching programs out there?
I think, again, touching on the key bit, I won't labour the point. I think one of the key parts is that when things aren't working and there's challenge, we run straight into that. So I'll park that there for a second. The other part is acknowledging how busy people are and starting with a very simple, very basic framework. So how we work, like the goals, the habits, the behaviors, we start really tiny, small and incremental. And for the guys that I work with, when we decide to work together, I often say, look, mate, you're going to have to part your ego because that doesn't seem like a lot. And they go, that's not much. It's like, yep, you're not doing it right now. So how's about we do that and see what happens? And so it's about starting with holistic, simple, tiny, incremental goals and then building steadily and slowly from that. I think where most people start and work, or what they often do, is they go head first, try and do 10 things at once, they cling on for a week or two and it all falls over. For me, it's about doing that the complete opposite way around. So starting tiny, small and incremental, building up confidence that you can achieve those things, recognizing that it can fit in, and then slowly layering and stacking those things on top of each other. But then again, to labour, when this goes pear-shaped, which it will because life always happens, we work through and address that. And I think that's the core point of difference. It's recognizing that life is going to present you with demands and you can't always be perfect, and that's ultimately what it's all about. And sometimes it's like, well, what can you do? What is the best thing you can possibly do in this situation? And sometimes it might be 10 steps below what you actually want to do, but having the wherewithal, consciousness and understanding to know that I'm cool with that because I know I've got this framework and that's me right today. But then tomorrow I can go right back to where I was. And it's having the ability to, or empowering our clients to have the ability to flex and flow with the demands of what's coming. There's a fundamental, simple process to get them where they need to be and building that up. But at the same time, giving them the support and guidance for when things go wrong, we address that.
For those watching and those that have been listening and maybe even resonating and they're thinking to themselves, this sounds like me or this sounds like a situation I've been facing, how can they find out more? How can people listening today learn more on how to work with a 1% and yourself?
So the easiest way is for us to book in what I would call a performance consultation. It's a 15-minute chat where we have a quick chat to make sure that we're both on the same page, find out a little bit more about them, where they're at, what they're struggling with, and then providing that we are on the same page and there's alignment there, what we would then follow up with is a longer deep dive call. We have a real deep dive into where they're at, the goals, what they're struggling with, help and support the need. On that call, I can cover off in a lot more detail how I work, what the process is like. At the end of that conversation, and we like the sound of working together, we can talk about that. But ultimately, what that first little call is about is making sure that we're aligned with what we need to do in order to help them, give them what they need, but also allay any sort of skepticism, because some of the guys watching this might not ever invested in any coaching, or they may have done quote unquote like fitness programs, whatever else in the past, and this is much more than that. And sometimes I think it can almost sound a bit too good to be true, but actually when you've gone through a process to be honest with your situation, where you're at, and empower someone to give them what they need to do that, that can be incredibly helpful. And so rewinding from all of that, the point of having an initial chat is just to make sure that we've got synergy, we're on the same page, and actually there is something here that can help them. And I think often in the kind of coaching space, there can be skepticism because it's like, well, how can you help me do what you say in such a short space of time? Well, I think part of that is looking at the social proof, looking at the guys I've worked with. If you check out my social media or my website or my other pages, there's countless examples of guys in very, very similar situations that I've worked with that have gone through the process to do that, either talking openly on an interview like this or even just posting about their experience on a platform like LinkedIn, and there's countless examples like that. And so I think that goes a very, very long way to assuaging any sort of concerns about, well, does this work and is it for me? Because there's, to be frank, a huge body of evidence to show that it does. And there's a Steve Martin quote, this might sound a bit arrogant, which is like, be so good they can't ignore you. It's like, well, you just look at that and you'll realise that there is a process and a path to take people where they need to be. But the point of a quick chat is also, all that being said, great, that all looks fantastic, but are we right? Will we be a good fit together? Well, the point of us having a quick 10-minute chat or 15-minute chat is to make sure that we're aligned, either with myself or my team. And that's what that's for as well. And then providing we are, we can have a follow-up conversation and see if there's a piece of work to be done together.
Look, Luke, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. For those watching, I hope you've got a ton of value from what's been shared, and by all means, please do check out the work Luke is doing. And if you've resonated, if this has felt like something that maybe you need help with, do reach out to Luke and his team to learn more and unearth what you could achieve through their help.
Thank you very much. Cheers.